We're talking tonight to Dorothy Hughes, who was inducted into the Marin Women's Hall of Fame in March of this year, 1991. Dorothy is well known in the Marin County community, and I'm going to read to you briefly from her nomination papers so you'll get an idea of what kind of person she is. When she was nominated to the Women's Hall of Fame, her papers said as follows: Dorothy Hughes is well known to everyone in Marin County who cares about people. She continues to organize, chair, or serve on important Marin-based groups devoted to human rights, mental health, children and youth, poverty, homelessness, county budgets, and social change. She is a recognized leader whose creative talents and energies are dedicated to making Marin County a better place in which to live for all of its citizens. That's a pretty tall order. I'm going to start with a big question, Dorothy. Can you tell our audience what you think it is that makes you tick? Who are you and what are you all about?
Well, I think that, well, I guess I know that a consuming interest of mine is social and economic justice, that for some reason I was always concerned about what was happening to other people and why the world didn't seem like a just place, and that was a kind of it was influenced the way I thought and the way I felt, the things that I looked for.
And was that true all your life?
I think so. I mean, it's hard to say. At what point do you become a perceptive person who really perceives what you're thinking? There aren't very many signposts when you're young, and that's one of the advantages of old age. You have lots of signposts.
Yes, and you can invent all the ones for your young age. Well, why don't we go back to your youth? Tell us where you were born, where you lived as a youngster.
I was born in Woodland, California, and I was raised on a ranch in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, a cattle and a sheep ranch.
For heaven's sakes, Tell me about your parents.
Well, my father was, obviously a man who raised sheep and cattle, and he had he had a very strong sense of justice too. And I remember in the early days of the 30s when the Depression was in full force, and when we would be in Woodland, because people didn't come onto the ranch. I mean, our house was too far in for people to just wander by, but people would come by the house, and he would see that people had money and that people were fed. And when it came to living on the ranch, and we had, I think, something like 12 cowboys and numerous sheep herders. And I remember when people started talking about Social Security, he was saying, well, why do we need that? I mean, you just see that everybody that worked for you has a house when they retire, and you just, pay them every month just like they were still working for you.
Had you always known that you would go on to Stanford? I mean, or had you always known that you'd go to college?
Oh, I'd always thought I'd go to college, yes. But I don't know why I picked Stanford, except perhaps just being at a school where so many of my friends were going to be going there. Probably that was it more than anything.
And what did you hope to get out of college? Did you have a goal?
Yes, I wanted to be a social worker.
You did?
And I thought that I would do that, and that I would work for, quite a long time, and then I would, get married very romantically, and that at some point I would have a child or two, because of course everyone did that. And so anyway,
how did that all work?
Well, that didn't quite work out that way. I went to Stanford in '41. The war was on, and by I was in my last quarter at Stanford in '44 when my husband got a leave from the Navy. He was in medical school, but for some reason they let them come home. They hadn't been coming home. They'd been going through school, right? So we decided to get married. So we did get married. And
while you were still in school?
While we were still in school, but then I decided to go on the honeymoon and go back to St. Louis with him. So I didn't. So I didn't finish the last quarter. As a matter of fact, no.
Oh, weren't you madcap?
I know. I mean, people couldn't understand that. I mean, no. People understood it then because 1944 was a pretty disturbed time in our young lives. I mean, our friends were dying, and there was a kind of fatal, you know, fatality about the whole era.
Did marriage mean to you that you were going to give up your dream of being a social worker? I mean, was there a conflict for you, or did you not?
No, I just sort of, you know, fell into marriage and thought, you know, later I might do something, but I didn't think about it very much. A year after I was married, I had my first child. And
where were you living?
In St. Louis, where my ex-husband was going to medical school.
I see.
And so that was another career, you see.
I'll say. Well, how many children did you have?
I had 6, and then my youngest sister died, and I adopted her children, so I ended up raising 8. Which wasn't exactly planned, you might say, because I did think I'd have 1 or 2 after I'd worked as a social worker for some time.
Isn't it funny how life turns out?
Yes, right.
Well, after St. Louis, what?
So, we came back to Sacramento. We came to Sacramento, where my husband did his internship and residency. And
did you have a life beyond your children in those years? Did you do were you involved in anything in the community in Sacramento?
I was involved with the Sacramento Medical Society, Medical Auxiliary, you know, and we did fashion shows.
That's what wives did.
That's what wives did.
Yeah.
I was a member of the Junior League and did volunteer work for that. And so yeah, we had a social life besides camping and playing with the neighbor children.
But at one point, you left that life. Why did you leave?
Well, because my husband, who was a surgeon, was an alcoholic, and all of the problems that one has with that sort of thing were there.
Did you come to Marin then, or what?
No, I went back to school.
You
and
did?
And got a master's in European diplomatic history and 17th, 18th century philosophy.
Now, what were you going to do?
Well, I didn't know exactly, but I thought maybe I could teach school. It was just before there was a big drop in the hiring of teachers. And it was the easiest thing I could think to take, you know. My mind doesn't run toward mathematics and science and that sort of thing. And it was, and I had you know, the 8 children at home, and to supplement my income, because I was not getting any money from my ex-husband, even though the courts ordered it. They're very reluctant to make a father from a prominent person pay. So anyway, I taught school. So I was working full-time teaching adult education, which I found very interesting, and also teaching neighborhood youth corps. Do you remember the corps?
I do, yeah.
And that was a wonderful experience for me.
How did you you must have had to have some support from somewhere. Did your family?
Well, my father had died and had left me some money.
Oh, I see, because that must have been a very rugged time for you with 8 kids.
It was. And I slept from 1 in the morning until 5 for 3 years so that I could take care of them and be with them and spend a lot of time with them. And and you know, and write my papers for school and clean the house and do all those things.
And teach too? What drove you? I mean, a lot of people would say, "No, that's too much."
Well, I know, but I
it."
had to do it because I had to. I mean, I had these children to raise. I mean, there wasn't any. There wasn't, and I had my health, and there wasn't any. I didn't have any other answer.
And what happened to you when you moved to Marin? Did you get a job here?
It took me 6 months, and it was really, really frightening. I had no idea that it was going to be so difficult to find work. I started working for this poverty program, just doing some special kind of things for that, and then...
You're back into social work now.
Yeah,
Finally
right,
into social work, I should say.
Right, and then Fred Hampton was killed in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
And the Black Panthers called Phil Drath. Do you remember Phil Drath?
Of course.
And he called me and my sister and said, people have to go to San Francisco and walk up and down in front of the headquarters of the Black Panther office because they're afraid that they're going to be the victims of a shootout. So we went over and walked there all night, and then when we went to leave in the morning, they asked if anybody would come and help them do some clerical work around the newspaper and so on. So I stayed, and I worked there for several months.
For goodness sake.
Until I found, until I just by chance, I ran into a friend who said that Nevada Christian at the Mental Health Association was looking for an assistant. So, having destroyed all my chances of getting a government job by working for the Black Panthers, I looked at other options, and it fit, because I mean, here's a group of people who, mental health clients, who have the same problems as any other minority group of people. I mean, they're discriminated against, and the services offered were not very much, and they had a very difficult time speaking for themselves. And so it interested me very much, and I went to work there, and then Nevada Christian retired after a year, which was she had planned to do. I think she was about 70 years old then,
I remember
maybe
her,
a little bit older.
Uh-huh.
And then I became the director, so that's been 21 years.
You've been the director for 21 years, my goodness. And has it been a fulfilling career?
It's been very fulfilling, and it's been very, I think people wonder how you can stay in the same job so long, but it isn't the same job. I mean, it has, of course, a base, but that always stays the same. But seeing that mental health clients have quality services, I must say our quality services have eroded terribly the last 10 years under
What were you trying to accomplish as the director? What you're still trying to accomplish something, but what did you see your role?
Well, besides the fact that the very important thing for mental health clients always right now is to have adequate services and to get the kind of help they need. So yeah, one of the things that we did was we actually got people together and set up boards of directors and got money and started Buckaloo House, Avanti House, Marin Lodge. We set up the Marin Suicide Prevention Center. And then on the preventive side, we worked with groups to start the Fairfax San Anselmo Children's Center and the Canal Children's Center and so on. But besides the thing of actually setting up services, we felt that and surely that's why we got into child care and other things, was because we felt that that if people are going to have emotional health, not to mention physical health, we have to have a community that's healthy. We have to have a community where people work together for the common good, and that preventive mental health was certainly as important as services to people who had already become broken down.
Yeah.
Right.
That sounds very visionary and innovative. Have there been other people who have approached this job in the same way in other areas? I mean,
I think they've stayed more on the on services for the mentally ill,
sure.
except in this way. They have many of them have set up support groups, which is very, very important for, you know, all kinds of different different things. I think that that those are important things to do, but I also think that we tend to fragment, you know. So I mean, if you have one kind of a problem, you go to group Tuesday night.
Yeah.
If you have another kind of a problem, you go to another different group on Wednesday night. And you don't see how these problems are interrelated. You don't see the larger picture of a pretty unhealthy society, as a matter of fact, which has missed its mark, I'm afraid.
Well, I know that one of the ways that you have tried to remedy a society that has missed its mark has been in conceiving of and pushing for the campaign for a healthier community for children. Can you tell us something about that?
Yes, well, the campaign certainly came out of this thinking that we needed to have a community, and so the idea was that we would start a campaign where we would get older people and families and children and anyone who was interested in rebuilding community. We would get them together and begin to talk to the children and the adults, and see what their idea was for a healthy community. What would they like to see happen? What would the children like to have happen to their community? What is it that's missing? What would make it better? So we did. We worked with the schools and worked with the children, and I remember the first meeting of the campaign for a healthier community for children with the children, and the idea is that children get equal time with adults. In the United States, children don't have a real sense of their roles and responsibilities. They don't have a sense of who they are in a community because it's pretty much lacking, and children tend to live in isolated nuclear families. So the idea is we all listen to the children, and they get the idea that they are being listened to, they're being heard, and they're being respected, and people don't interrupt, and they get to say things the way they want to say them. And another thing they said was, we need a place to go after school. We don't have any places to go, and we can't go home because nobody's there, and somebody might follow you, and who would you call? We don't know our neighbors. Who would we call? How would we get help? So we just hang out, but we're not, and then people don't want us in the stores, and it's, I mean, we're talking, this is the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade we're talking to that day, that first day, and children from those grades. And so they said, why don't you do something so we have a place to go? And the town heard about this and offered us Robeson Harrington House to use in the afternoons after school. So we have volunteers, and they do, and the children do all kinds of things. They dance, and they do music, and they do plays and games, and high school students come and do their community service there. And of course the children are just enchanted with these. And the children, usually are, say, 6 to 12.
Dorothy, as you talk about these problems, I realize that, because I know you so well, I'm going to let you speak your piece a little bit about some of the problems you see in our society and how you look upon some of the failures of our society. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Surely, surely. Well, I think you know, when we talk about children who are 5 and 6 years old and are staying home alone all summer, we're talking about a society that's abandoned its children. The leaders have said that the children don't count. And we all know that the children are the future, and that, in fact, we don't have a future without the children. And as I think many people know, this is the only industrial country in the world that doesn't provide child care for its people, either free or at such a sliding scale that everyone's children are in, anyone who has to work's children are in child care. School starts in Europe at age 3, and from 3 to 6, the children go to free schools. So if their and the children are kept there as long as the parents need them to if they're working. So, and they're very, and these are very, very excellent quality child centers for the children. And go ahead.
Well, it just sounds to me as though you think that other societies have solved this problem or have solved a lot of their problems better than we have.
That's true. That's very true. And I think, and I know that this is the only country that does not provide national health care, the only industrial country that doesn't provide national health care and doesn't do a lot of affordable housing. Many countries, there's a standard, a worker will pay 10% of their income for housing, and the landlord gets tax rebates in order to be able to keep that at a lower rate. All European countries give 5 to 6 weeks vacation from the first year on to all of their workers. That sets a whole different tone for raising a family and being with friends and keeping your friendships with your neighbors and your families and so on going. They have 15-day holidays in many, 15 3-day holidays in many countries. Equal pay for equal work is absolutely enforced in Europe. So you don't have women who are, if they are alone, raising children or not, who are struggling like we have families struggling here.
I know that you have on the side a little love affair with Italy. Do you want to tell me about that?
Yes. Well, I've been going to Italy for about 30 years. In my other life, I used to take my children, when they were very, very young, to Europe for the summer. And I fell in love with Italy. I mean, I loved it. I loved all of Europe, but I fell particularly in love with Italy and have spent a lot of time there. And the last, I guess it was in 79, I went to Bologna because to spend 5 weeks, I guess, because I had known about had heard so much about what a community, family, extended family kind of a city it was, and that the services in Bologna and in the Emilia-Romagna region were particularly good. But it was there that the idea for the campaign for a healthier community for children came, because each town hall is organized in a way with volunteers from the community and then council members who work on the cultural, recreational, sport, and whatever else, things that go on, children's theater, all kinds of things, music, emanate out of the City Hall, are planned for the parks and so on by these groups. And so we decided that since our government wasn't going to do that, that we would start from the grassroots and do it, and we would work through the city halls, which we do in Fairfax and in Mill Valley and in San Anselmo. Our councils work very closely with the towns in putting on different festivals and different events to get people together.
Have there been hard times, discouraging times, or how do you feel about your work? We're going to wind up our talk here in a few minutes, and I'd just like to know how you feel about the prospects.
Yes. Well, I'm a very hopeful person. I tend to think when I see things going badly, you know, well, but more people are noticing, you know, and maybe we'll start doing something about it. And I think, you know, that next year things will be better. Well, that hasn't been what I've seen the last 10 years. The 70s were the halcyon days. We had money to do things and put together a whole range of services and activities, and it's falling apart. There's no doubt about it, and it could be very discouraging. I mean, it's very sad. It's tragic. But it makes me just want to redouble my efforts, actually, and try to get more people involved. And I think that one of the problems and one of the most discouraging things in the United States is that people aren't very political. And I think that always think it's a mistake to blame the people. They are not the enemy. The American people are the least informed people in the Western world, and for many reasons. They don't have access to the news media that really represents the huge broad spectrum from communism all the way to fascism. Every city in Europe has that kind of coverage. That's true on the TV too. So information is much more available. I know Thomas Jefferson was concerned. He said you can't have a democracy without an informed public, and I'm afraid that we're not informed, and that the very, very stressful kind of lives people lead, the commuting, the long work hours, and so on, make it easy to just not get involved. I mean, make it difficult, in other words, to get the kind of information that you need to make the kind of changes that we need to make in this.
Say what had been the greatest joy of your life. What would you say it was?
My children and my grandchildren, absolutely. I think that they've taught me more, that both my children and my grandchildren, than probably anything. I mean, when you're involved with that many people, I mean, you've just got to learn or fall apart.